we'll start off as usual, taking some prayer requests. So I mentioned to a few people, Dale Dankert, members in the hospital with sepsis, so we'll make sure to include him in our prayers tonight. What else is on your mind to pray about?
The Ukraine.
Okay. Yeah. The world is...
It's breaking.
Yeah, it is. A lot of sad things going on. Absolutely. Anything else? All right. All right. Well, let's go to our Heavenly Father in prayer then. Dear Lord, thank you for allowing us to meet together tonight to study your word together. Let us always cherish that opportunity to grow in our knowledge and our faith in you. There's a lot of terrible things happening in the world right now, Lord, but we know you're in control. Be with those in Ukraine and help heal those strong running tensions and show us that you are in control as we know that you are. And also be with Dale Dankert, our member who's got sepsis right now. Please use the doctors and physicians to provide healing for Dale and comfort. And just be with all those who are sick and suffering right now, Lord. All this we ask in your Son's name. Amen. Hey, morning, Veronica. I did it again, Olivia. Good evening, Veronica. I've said good morning twice now.
I'm sorry.
I
know what you meant.
0 for 2. Okay. It's only up from here. All right. So we are in our last Wednesdays in the Word until after Lent, which is crazy because that means Ash Wednesday is next Wednesday. So we'll have 7 o'clock worship service next week. And then every week after that, we'll have 7 o'clock devotion and 6:15 soup supper for the other 5 Wednesdays in Lent. So hopefully you join us for those as well. But tonight, another night in the book of 1Kings. So we're continuing on our study of this wonderful book with its amazing history and seeing God's providence. Now, last week, we got almost all the way to the end of 1Kings 18, verses 1 through 18. So that's the worksheet we're going to be starting on. And then we'll answer one more question, and then we'll go on to some new material from 1Kings 18, 19 through 46. But we'll start on that 1Kings 18, 1 through 18 sheet. And we're going to be answering question number 7. Many in Israel gave in to Ahab and Jezebel's pressure. Now, in order to answer that question, we need some context as to what's going on right now in our account. So who will do a little summarizing for us as to where we're at here in 1Kings 18? I'll get us started with a little summary thought then. So we've been talking about a whole bunch of different kings, and things just seem to get worse and worse and worse. They stray farther and farther away from the Lord. And now we're on King Ahab, and Ahab is the worst king yet. He's more evil than all the kings before him, as is how one passage pretty well put it. And so we're in this time of Ahab, and he's got a wife, Jezebel, who is not God-fearing and in fact is persecuting Christians. So last week we heard about Elijah, who's a prophet, and Elijah and Ahab, they're not on good terms because Elijah fears the Lord. So Ahab, Elijah, they butt heads in this account, and we heard about how another man named Obadiah was hiding some of the Lord's prophets so that they couldn't be murdered. Because Ahab and Jezebel, mostly fueled by Jezebel, it seems, were out killing God's people. So that's going to be kind of the context for this first question number 7 on 1Kings 18, 1 through 18. A little review, and then we'll get into some new stuff. So many in Israel gave in to Ahab and Jezebel's pressure. They worshiped false gods, turned away from the Lord. What would you have done if you had lived in Israel in those days? And then where do we turn to find strength to hold to Christ when others are turning away from him? So kind of broad. What would you do?
Go find Obadiah, ask him to hide me.
Okay. Yeah. Try and get hidden as well. Sure. Yeah.
You know, why not?
Yeah. The very real threat of death.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
And hopefully I wouldn't give in, but under the circumstances, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think
I can't
anybody
imagine
knows.
myself doing it.
Yeah, I don't think anybody knows what they would do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's-
Yeah. It's hard to know until you are in that situation. We think through things, and then the rubber hits the road in real life. And there are Christians right now who are facing persecution and the threat of death. Sometimes it's good to remember that as well. Not every country has religious freedom like we do.
Right.
How about that question? Where do we turn to find strength to hold on to Christ when others are turning away from him? So we know this is going to be difficult. How do we find the strength to continue on in a godly path?
Pray for help.
Pray.
Pray, read the Bible.
Keep studying.
Mhm.
Yeah. And God's promised us there's always going to be a remnant, some who still believe. So we'll know that we're never alone, not doing this battle alone. Any other thoughts on that question? All right, let's flip to 1 Kings 18, verses 19 through 46. That's where we're going to begin tonight. And we got quite a few online tonight, so I think we'll give some reading options to those who are online tonight. So again, we're using the player pass method. If you learn better by reading something out loud, then please play. Some people that they would be too focused on trying to get the words correct, and if that's you, then please pass and listen and comprehend. So we'll take verses 19 and 20 of 1 Kings 18. So let's go, Robin, play or pass, reading those few verses.
It's like she's on mute.
There I am. Okay, I'll read. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel.
Awesome. Tonight we have a very special guest appearance, technology. Here's a map of Israel, so we can kind of orient ourselves. Start to slowly zoom in. So here is Israel at this time. Here's Jerusalem. This is, the most famous city. Ahab, he is the king of the northern tribes of Israel. So this is Judah, this is Israel. His main palace is in Samaria, but it's summertime right now, and he's got a summer palace up here in Jezreel. So Elijah asks to have this duel essentially on Mount Carmel, which is way up here by the coast. And Mount Carmel, it's known for being a very fertile land. The name of Mount Carmel basically means something like garden or vineyard, orchard, something where things would grow well. And some would view this as kind of being Baal's home turf. He's the false god of prosperity and vegetation and growth, to some degree. And so some would say this is kind of Baal's home turf. Let's get to that first question then. Why do you think Ahab went along with Elijah's proposal? Why even agree to this challenge?
Because he's arrogant and thought he would win.
All right, arrogant thought he'd win, yeah.
There's
My opinion.
no way he thought he could lose that. I imagine.
Yep.
That just sounded ludicrous.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, sure, let's do that. Yeah, that'll be hilarious.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you remember, this is in the midst of a 3.5-year drought. So hasn't been rain, which was Baal's thing. He's the god of thunder and would, in their mind, send the rain. So I guess they thought that maybe he would come through for them. In this case, Ahab did, and thought that the prophets would be able to win this contest.
One guy against 400,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. We'll actually see it's going to be 850 by the end once we get a few more verses in. Yeah, okay.
People placing bets that day had really good odds.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, if you bet on Elijah, I mean, he's like, 850 to 1.
Right.
It's pretty good odds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else in those verses sticking out to you? All right, let's keep going then. Verses 21 through 24. Ginny, we're up to you. Play or pass? Pass? Sorry, I wasn't looking. Yep.
No, I got it.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I just had to turn the mute. Okay, then Elijah, no, wait, 21.
Yep. 21 through 24.
Okay, Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them, "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let them choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God." Then all the people said, "What you say is good."
All right. Anything initially sticking out that you want to talk about?
No, I think Elijah was just being smart because he knew that God was going to set fire. He knew God was going to come through. So he was just going to prove it to the people.
All right. Yeah. We see this confidence.
It's really
Is
great.
it
Absolutely.
something he and God had discussed? Is that in the Bible, or did we just assume that?
I guess that's, yeah, it doesn't, I guess, specifically say
God
that God told him to.
Yeah.
Either way, we'll see at the end, God's going to answer his prayer positively. So, yeah, it seems like God does guide Elijah's path most of the time. Tells him to go to Ahab, so he goes. So I think it's likely. We can't say with 100%.
Without them knowing it, he's making these people put their God to the test.
Yeah.
They don't realize it, that, to them, it's like, okay, whatever, it's a good, that's a good deal, but he's basically doing 2 things. I mean, he's showing our God, God, our Lord will prevail, but their God's going to fail, and he sees it coming, but of course they don't.
Mm-hmm.
They probably still doubt it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we get this interesting interplay where it seems like the people are kind of wavering back and forth, maybe a little polytheism. Maybe they think both gods are good. I mean, Ahab still listens to Elijah. He still seems to respect him to some degree. I mean, maybe not as much as he should, but he still listens to him. As we read through this account, I think it's interesting that Elijah is the one kind of calling all the shots. Whatever he says is what happens. Which is interesting because he's, the one prophet of the Lord, and there's these other prophets.
Yeah, like
That-
he's the only guy that has an idea and none of them do.
Mm.
Nobody comes up with some solution, they're just like, oh, whatever. And he's
Mhm.
like, oh, I got an idea. Let's do this. And they're like, okay.
Mhm.
He's the only guy that, and nobody argues with it.
Mhm.
They don't say anything. They're like, okay,
Mhm.
it's interesting.
Yeah.
Nobody argues, well, why? Why should we? They just go, okay.
Yeah. It makes me think, where are these people at spiritually?
Yeah.
What's going on
Like
here?
totally open to suggestion for some reason. Maybe they're just really sick of drought or something.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. But that's question number 2. Were the people for God or against him? Verse 21.
They kept quiet, so against him, I would say.
Okay. Yes. So Elijah says, how long will you waver between 2 opinions? People said nothing. Okay. So you think against him, Craig?
Mhm.
Okay.
I think that they didn't want to pick one side or the other because they were afraid of what would happen if they chose God in front of Ahab and Jezebel.
All right. Very interesting thought. I think we're onto something with that one. Potentially. Yeah. And again, this is speculation. I can't read hearts. You can't either. And we're just presented with the narrative and we get to draw some ideas from it. But yeah, people are under pretty big fear of Ahab and Jezebel. Obadiah is hiding people in caves because he's afraid of what will happen.
I was thinking too, there's a passage, I forget which of the gospel it is, where Jesus tells the disciples, whoever is not against you is for you. But then later on, Jesus says, whoever is not for me is against me, right? That this is a situation where the people have totally been going along with the pattern for a while. And Elijah isn't looking for them to be on his side or expecting them to be yet, but simply their neutrality or even interest is sufficient,
Mhm.
like one thing at a time.
It's an interesting way to look at things. Yeah. Kind of a building, an escalation of belief, maybe. Escalation of
Well,
something.
and often if you think too about how much of ministry is shepherding, right? It's not forcing, it's not pushing, it's leading, guiding. And that's where he is here. He's one guy, but he's famous. He's a celebrity. Everyone's super. He's in the Bible, so he's kind of famous. That's true. That's what Robert says. But he, even if you don't like him, a celebrity you just turns up in town, you might still have some interest,
That's an interesting angle, the celebrity of Elijah. Yeah, and what you said about, I guess previously about shepherding, I think we'll see a lot of care that Elijah has in this section and some tender moments. We'll get to that later in verse 32-ish. Yeah, but he could have come with the hammer and brought down the house, but he plays it patiently and we're kind of building to something. Okay, so now let's take a look at what Jesus says about such attitudes in Revelation 3:16. So I can read that. So this is in Revelation, Jesus sending messages to some churches, and we get to listen because it's a good warning for us as well. So this is to the Church of Laodicea. Pastor preached on this a few months back. So because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I'm about to spit you out of my mouth. And then in Matthew 10:32 and 33, whoever acknowledges me before men, I will also acknowledge him before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before men, I will disown him before my Father in heaven. What does Jesus say about similar attitudes to these people?
He doesn't seem to care for it. Yeah, you think about those are scary things to think about.
Mhm.
If you won't acknowledge you before my Father in heaven. That's a pretty scary, scary thought
Yeah.
that you were being so, you wouldn't do it before men. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
I guess if you're, in this case, if you're trying to ride the fence, you're really on either side, right? God doesn't call us to be halfway committed to him. You know, we're all in. He's changed our lives, and that light is going to show in our lives. Or as you reject him before people, try and play both sides. I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. That is not pleasant imagery. Other thoughts on that idea or on these section of verses? All right, then let's take a look at how this famous showdown goes down. Let's take verses 25 through 29. Peter, you are next on my screen. Play or pass?
I'll take it. So, then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose for yourselves one bull and prepare it first, for you are many, and call upon the name of your God, but put no fire to it. And they took the bull that was given them, and they prepared it, and called upon the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, O Baal, answer us. But there was no voice, and no one answered. And they limped around the altar that they had made. And at noon, Elijah mocked them, saying, cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is musing, or is relieving himself, or he is on a journey, or perhaps he's asleep and must be awakened. And they cried aloud and cut themselves after their custom with swords and lances until the blood gushed out upon them. And as midday passed, they raved on until the time of the offering of the oblation. But there was no voice, no one answered, no one paid attention.
All right, thank you. Describe the scene when the prophets of Baal start praying to their God.
Like a bunch of heathens.
Okay. Well, that's what they are, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
They were
Bunch of heathens.
full, acting out, cutting themselves, and screaming and yelling and tearing at their clothes and just having fits all over the place.
And it says right here, that's a common practice, I guess, for them in reference to their God. And so
Mhm.
I guess cutting themselves, I guess they thought would help bring him. So.
Yeah, and that's something that's specifically spoken against in the law that God gave the people, self-mutilation in worship. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds to me like when they really needed this God, he bailed on them.
Uh-huh.
Now, how many lessons have you been waiting to use that one?
Oh, I come up with new jokes every week. They
Oh,
just
wow.
sound old.
Yeah, so they're in this frenzy. Probably quite the sight to behold. You think they're here a long time. This is kind of an all-day event.
Yeah.
You sit down to watch a 3-hour football game, and by the end, you're kind of like, whew. You feel a little exhausted now. Now think about these people, 7-8 hours out here. Not the quiet meditative prayer, but screaming, shouting, stabbing each other. This is, I think if you got dropped into the scene, you would be shocked by what's
Chaos.
happening. Yeah.
Seemed like chaos.
Yeah. Well, let's keep going. We'll see the response. Oh yeah, go ahead, Peter. Yep.
Yeah, there's just one thing stood out to me in that very last part of that verse 29, just the fact there was no response, no one answered, no one paid attention. Like, sometimes people want to make the case that like that the Bible leaves the door open for multiple ways to heaven or multiple options. And like the Bible isn't just saying nobody answered. It's certifying that there was no one there to answer. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, an image that is used elsewhere in the Bible is that idols are a mist. Like when you breathe on a cold morning and you see the air, maybe it looks like something, maybe this little wooden idol looked like something, but there's nothing there.
I mean, we know they missed Baal.
Ooh, okay. We got some good ones tonight. I like it. Yeah, I think well said though, Peter. Not just your jokes, but the actual point that you made, that there's nothing here. This is not just a false god or a less than God. This is not a god. This is a nothing. Any other comments before we see how Elijah takes his turn at things? All right, we'll take verses 30 through 38 then. Bob or Cindy, you're next on my screen. Play or pass?
We'll pass.
Sounds good. All right, Chris, you are next on my screen. Would you like to play or pass?
All right, we're going to from verse 30.
Yep, until verse 38. And you can read as long as you'd like.
Yeah, I'll read part of it. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come near to me." And all the people came near to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. Elijah took 12 stones, according to the number of tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord came, saying, "Israel shall be your name." And with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. And he made a trench around the altar, as great as would contain 2 seahs of seed. And he put the wood in order and cut the bowl in pieces and laid it on the wood. And he said, "Fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood." And he said, "Do it a second time." And they did it a second time. And he said, "Do it a third time." They did it a third time. And the water ran around the altar and filled the trench also with water.
All right, verse 36. I guess we'll go here in the room then. Greg, pass.
I'd be glad to. 36 through 38.
Yep.
At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are the God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command." So I guess the Lord did tell him.
Mhm.
"Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and it also licked up the water in the trench.
We might as well take one more verse. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." All right, what an amazing scene before us. Initial thoughts?
Well, I noticed that he, not only was the wood put up around the sacrifice, they soaked the wood. And, you know, I don't know about anybody here, but if you've ever tried, like if you had wet wood and you tried to start a fire, it's not easy. So, you know, that's basically what it was like here, even just to even prove his point even further.
He would have had to go to a lot of trouble to get the water because it was a drought, so they would have had to get it from the ocean, like a mile away or something, because somebody pointed this out before, studied this once before. So they would have had to go get it. It wasn't far, but it would be a lot of trouble to get that much water up there because it just wasn't available otherwise.
Yeah.
So they were willing to do that, you know, go to all that trouble. Yeah, it's pretty spectacular.
Well, Vicar, I can tell you that it completely violates the fire triangle.
What's the fire triangle?
The oxygen, the fuel, and the heat that's required for a fire. That is, someone who's fought fires before, that's the oxygen. You eliminate one of them and there's no fire. Well, here you have something completely soaked. There's no way that it could ignite. But God would be the response to that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Something was standing out to me this time that I hadn't noticed before. I was thinking about it, I think on Sunday in the Bible study, there was something that came up that I got thinking about how like miracles are not means of grace. Like we don't come to faith by seeing something impressive. We come to faith through word and sacrament. You know, the Holy Spirit works through word and sacrament. And Elijah says, let it be known that you are God in Israel. But then he also says that, you know, this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and you have turned their hearts back. You know, that the turning of the hearts isn't predicated on the great sign. God is doing the work of turning the hearts, and then showing this sign as like a capstone on that. I just thought that was kind of interesting. And also just a good general reminder that like we very easily can get drawn into thinking of our faith as like fundamentally a personal thing, a personal decision or action or something, but that this is a large corporate action. That is a group of people who God is calling, even though it still comes down to individual faith.
Good point, Peter.
Also, it's just an example of how God does not make things look easy. He makes it, you know, for no doubt that he has his hand with his mighty arm that he led them out of Egypt. But with Gideon and his army, he said, hey, they may have 195,000 soldiers, but you have 10. He said, that's too many. I want them to know that it's my hand when I put it down to 300. So he makes a statement that it's not the people, it's him. And all these miracles.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's part of soaking the wood too, right? Yeah, you don't want anyone to think, oh, you know, an accidental spark came and lit everything. No, this is a God thing. One thing that stuck out to me in this section, we were talking about it a little earlier, just the tenderness and intimacy of Elijah's initial action. He calls the people to him, you know, kind of picture they're on a mountaintop, the sun is setting, it's evening, calls the people over, and they go through this process of rebuilding the altar. This is a pretty big altar. I think it's like about 10-ish feet maybe. So it wasn't like, you know, snap your fingers, the altar's done. I mean, they're slowly putting the stones on, and the sun keeps setting, and there's people bringing the water, and it just strikes me as very intimate. And he's connecting, you know, 12 stones, the 12 tribes of Israel, is connecting with where they came from, calling them back. You know, remember that time you went down to Egypt and God brought you back out and he gave you this land and he was your God. And I think it's just an incredible pastoral feeling, shepherd feeling moment. One of my favorites. How about question number 4 then? What does Elijah's behavior tell you about his certainty that the Lord would answer his prayer?
He's got great faith. Faith strong.
He knows God does what he says. When he makes a promise, he's able to do it. He gives the order, it's gonna be commanded.
Absolutely. And you just think how foolish it would have looked if God didn't come down and burn up these sacrifices. That'd be pretty devastating for, you know, this one prophet versus all these other prophets. That kind of ruined his case, right? But not even thinking about that. That's not even a possibility. Not with God on your side. Other thoughts from this section? All right, then we'll finish out this chapter then. So verses 39 through 46. Joseph, we're up to you. You can play or you can pass.
I'll play. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, he is God, the Lord, he is God." Then Elijah commanded them, seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away They seized them, and Elijah had them brought down to Kishon Valley to slaughter and slaughtered there. And Elijah said to Ahab, "Go eat and drink, for there is the sound of heavy rain." So Ahab went off to eat and drink. But Elijah climbed to the top of Carmel, bent down to the ground, and put his face between his knees. "Go and look toward the sea," he told his servant. And he went up and looked. "There is nothing there," he said. 7 times Elijah said, "Go back." The 7th time the servant reported, "A cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea." So Elijah said, "Go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." Meanwhile, the sky grew black and the wind rose, a heavy rain started falling, and Ahab rode off to Jezreel. The power of the Lord came to Elijah, and tucking his cloak into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel.
All right, thank you very much. Anything initially striking you in this section?
I've often wondered about this, in this, in the King James Version, it said a hand was seen, they just described it as a hand that was coming. So the vision of the storm was like a hand. So that was the sign of the hand of the Lord, or what was that?
Yeah, I mean, uncertain, I suppose, or it's just, I mean, that's kind of what clouds look like, kind of, the hand coming. So I guess we don't have quite enough information to know exactly what that means. Yeah. I guess I've always pictured it just, that's kind of what it looks like, a little hand far away, and kind of the little fingertips on the clouds. What do you make of Ahab in this section? Why doesn't he try and stop at this slaughter of his prophets? Or why doesn't he try and kill Elijah? Well,
I think they're all in very serious awe of Elijah and of God at this point, from what they just saw. They're just going to do whatever Elijah says at this point. Because they'd be scared the same thing will happen to them.
I wouldn't want the fire to come down on your house.
Yeah,
so.
like Elijah could pray anything and it will now happen.
Mhm.
So they don't want to do anything wrong.
I think the thing is too, Ahab, like part of Ahab's problem has been his like lack of ethics. Like the immorality is a problem too, but like when it comes down to it, he's an opportunist. He's willing to change based on what's expedient or empowering to him. Like he goes along with Jezebel because it suits him, not because he had like some deep allegiance to Baal. And so the tide has turned, and it's not like he's going to stick his nose out and be like, "Oh man, I'm on Team Baal here still," just so you know, y'all.
It definitely strikes me as an opportunist, very pragmatic in his religious beliefs. Okay.
And then also, going back to other scriptures, you always see when Pharaoh got mad with his prophets and stuff, he killed them himself. So he didn't have much favor to them when they were wrong, because he commanded that they be all executed because they couldn't tell him about his dream. So these people probably didn't know, they were going to be lost anyway if his anger turned on them. So.
Sure. Yeah, always hard to get into the mind of what these false prophets are thinking or how they're reacting. Okay.
I had another thought too. There are times when the violence of the Old Testament weighs on me, and like the slaughtering of peoples and such, and this part with killing the prophets of Baal as well. But it really hit me reading through it this time. Like they were perfectly content up until this point to manipulate the people of Israel. Like they were getting people's offerings, they were getting positions of power in the political hierarchy due to their influence in Jezebel, and they were entirely content with that right up until this point, when the tide turned against them. So it really is. You talked about making a gamble. Someone made a comment about like making a bet earlier, and like they bet wrong.
I thought they did. Let's get to question number 5 then. So this is James 5:17 and 18. Elijah was a man just like us. He prayed earnestly that it would not rain, and it did not rain on the land for 3.5 years. Again, he prayed, and the heavens gave rain, and the earth produced its crops. What caused it to rain? Pretty straightforward. It's Elijah's prayer, right? Think of that verse, the prayer of a righteous man is powerful and effective. Here's a righteous man, and his prayer was powerful and effective. He prayed for no rain, it didn't rain. He prays for rain, it rains. Yeah. And of course, he's praying in line with God's will as well. So not that he was the one forcing the rain to come, but taking his request to God, holding God to the commands he had given Elijah to fulfill. Okay. Other thoughts from those first few verses before we get to the apply questions?
I have plenty of thoughts, Vicar. I don't know if it applies to it, but how many times do we look at the secular way of doing things as our answer instead of trusting God? That was all secular. That was I can do this on my own. I have my own ways. I have my own things. But the prophet showed that God's in control. But how many times do we do that in our life? If that makes sense.
Yeah, let's open up that question. What do you think?
It's really tempting to do that.
Kind of like the lottery's going to fix all my problems.
It's easy to get into that mindset. Yeah.
I think, there's another way you can look at it too. Like it's the classic Lutheran 2 canal or 2 trenches on the side of the road. That there was also, I bet there were people there talking about in the time of Baal about good old time religion, right? Like getting back to our roots here, Yep. Like it was definitely not the God that they should be following. But what was it? One of the kings we studied recently, where he like chopped down his grandma's Asherah pole, and there were people there who were probably wound up about that. It's like you can't go tearing down this stuff, like doesn't matter if you like it. Like this is part of our culture,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. That it was just one of those things you kind of think about, how do we apply it to modern day, because I can't comprehend what they dealt with. I know what desert life's all about, but they were in an interesting situation that our modern day cannot comprehend. And so it's kind of like, do we really do the same type of, not the exact same thing, but the ideology kind of thing? I didn't mean to open a can of worms, Vicar.
No, great. Hey, Bible class it's an avenue to talk about the things that are important to us. And I think life seems to be cyclical. History seems to be cyclical. New generations come and go, and we, based on my study of history, we seem to keep making the same mistakes. Maybe we think we're acting more in line with how things should go. There's always the tendency to say, oh, the previous generation, they knew nothing. I know so much better. But I think we keep making mistakes, and the ultimate temptation isn't just to have money be your God or whatever it is to be your God. It's ultimately for you to be your God. That's in my estimation, the great temptation. That's where other temptations stem from, because it just seems so good to us to be in control and to be that honcho. And if I was just in more control of my life, or if I was calling the shots, everything would be perfect.
Well, if nothing else, I had to throw you a curveball. That's part of vicar training.
I see something very interesting in the fact that we know that Elijah is a man of God, and we just saw that God answered his prayers with the fire. But when he went up on Mount Carmel to bend down and pray, he got on his knees and he prayed, but served to go out and look, but he had to go out 7 times. He kept praying, but that's like what we're talking about is in between asking for a prayer and having patience. He said, I don't see anything. To go back and look again, but he had to send him back 7 times. So I think that applies to where we think that we're going to get an instant answer to our prayer, but we have to pray and be patient and know that God will work in his time, not on our time. So that's what I see. That probably is a society problem, is that people want everything instantaneously. They don't want to wait. They think they lose their faith if it's not there tomorrow. And so in this example, it shows that that servant had to go look 7 times before he saw that cloud. So you just have to wait on the Lord and trust him and be faithful with it.
That's a great point. Being patient and waiting is not my thing.
I don't think it's any of our things.
It's a great point. I like that point. That's why I kind of threw it out there.
And anyone's always open to share questions that are on their mind, ideas, whatever. This is, again, just a chance to get with brothers and sisters in the faith and talk about things. So always feel free to jump in with whatever's on your heart and mind, and we can always change gears. I can hit the curveball too sometimes. There's a joke in baseball that no one can hit the curveball.
You'll get used to me.
Hope so. No. Any other thoughts on that? Feeling good. Yeah, thanks for that question, Chris. That was a good one to talk about. Okay, agree or disagree? We should teach our children to respect everyone's religion.
No, absolutely not.
No.
Okay.
No, because they're not equal, obviously, and you can point that out in about 2 minutes.
Understand maybe where they're coming from, but accept it and approve and support it. No.
No, I agree with that.
I think
There's a lot. Sorry, go ahead.
I think it's good to understand other religions, so you can prepare your children to understand what we're battling against. Because it's kind of like we're at war. We gotta, I guess, say, arm them with the knowledge to be able to, go against that. Because our goal is, not to deflect these people away, to try to hopefully convert them to Christianity and what we're doing, the Bible. And so that's what you would hope to do.
Good.
So I think there's a lot to in that word respect, like that you really have to unpack. And I think part of it is that tolerance is not necessarily endorsement, but it can be, but like if I do not take every breath of mine to like convert my Baptist neighbor from their Arminian heresies or something, right? Like, am I respecting them too much? Like, where's the boundary on it? Like, we must always stand up for the word. And at the same time, I think there's something to be said for the fact that we live in a country where we have the freedom to believe what we believe, even though we're a minority in belief. There's like 500,000 Wells Lutherans in this country, And if we put it up to a popular vote about what should Christianity look like in this country, we'd be way down on that priority list, you know? And so I'm grateful for the space we have to worship freely, in spite of the fact that most people think we're wrong. And I think like we should be able to respect people and to like honor their freedom to believe as they choose without endorsing or even like accepting that their beliefs are legitimate or have merit or something.
Well, Peter, it's like this when we canvass. I have said this many times often. They'll tell me what church they're going to, and it's not a good church or whatever. I say, well, we're not trying to steal you away, but here you go. I'm gonna plant you a seed and I'm gonna give you a flower. So hopefully, maybe they'll read over this information here. So.
And it's almost too like in this particular situation with Elijah, seeing is believing. And as we profess our Christian faith, we don't have that same dramatic effect that, God rains down and starts fires and stuff. But you have to tell people when you witness to them that, God will come to them in their time of trouble. And if you don't see that effect in your religion, say if whatever, whether you're Buddhist or whether you don't see your God coming down and answering, or how many promises can your God make to you that we know for certain that our God makes a promise to us, and we have evidence that he has fulfilled those promises in the past, and we have a promise. But that's a thing that's on an individual basis. But it would be nice if it was like we could just rain down fire and do those things in front of them to convince them. But we just have to plant the seed.
that'd be good.
And
You
keep
mean like
planting.
this?
Yeah. Yeah, just have to keep planting those seeds.
I think sometimes we think it would be great if the fire came down and there were miracles to go along with our words. And, God hasn't chosen that right now as his means of communicating. And I know how that would go to my head. We're going to see Elijah. Probably won't get to it tonight, but
Didn't a couple
next
of the
chapter.
apostles, I don't know what gospel it's in, but didn't a couple of them go, Lord, do you want us to call fire down on them?
Yeah, James, Sons of Thunder.
Yeah, it was, they were, dealing with whatever.
Mhm.
And Jesus was like, no, you don't know what you're saying. Stop it.
Yeah.
Samaria, they were in Samaria.
Okay.
And they wanted to rain down fire on them. And say, no, I know what we're doing.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think we think it would be great to have all this power, and instead we have to put our trust in God. I know that if I had all that power, my trust in God meter would start going down, down, down. Instead, he uses the word, something so small, so seemingly unprofound at times. Doesn't seem quite as powerful as a stick of dynamite, but the law blows up our hearts and shatters our preconceived notions and shows us that we're sinners, and he rebuilds us with his gospel. And it's the word that is really the true blessing that we have. And it'd be cool to be able to do miracles today too. I think we all think it'd be cool to see a miracle, but that's not how God has chosen to use us, and he's called us to trust. Reactions or other thoughts on respecting people's religion? I suppose one more thought that I had on the topic of respect is you have to think about what does it look like to respect someone.
Right.
Say someone is. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, what does that word even mean now? Because it's got all these different meanings. You'd have to actually get out the dictionary and then argue about whether or not you meant to use it that way, because now it's just politicized word now.
Okay, yeah, sure. I think about it though, like if you had like a military commander, let's just say, and you went on a march, and he was marching backwards so he could look at you, and there's a giant pit right behind him. What is the respectful thing to do? You're not supposed to be talking, you're supposed to be marching. Well, I would say, the respectful thing would be to point out, hey, there's a pit behind you. Now that there's a difference between, there's also being respectful and how you engage with someone, I think, and you don't necessarily have to shout at him, chew his ear out for not knowing he was gonna fall into a pit. Like, how could you be so stupid? As almost, you could do it kindly, you could do it respectfully, but still don't want him to fall into the pit.
That's a really good point. I hadn't really thought about this until just now, but we use the word respect a lot of times as a substitute word for deference or honor, right? Like when you say respect authority, we're not really saying like acknowledge its existence, like we're looking oftentimes for a submission aspect to that. But a lot of times also what we're talking about with respect is like when we talk about respecting one another is acknowledging our humanity, our like shared being made in the image of God, our common fallen state, the fact that Jesus died for all of us, and that it is possible to respect someone as a fellow child of God, someone in need of redemption, and to show love to them as someone respectable in that sense, without in any way deferring to their authority. I guess I think about like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? Like the act of standing up there when everyone else was submitting and protesting in the way they did was a form of disrespect to the king that earned them the death penalty that just didn't work, right? But what they were also doing was responding to the king in a way that was respectful. They weren't like trying to blow up the statue or something either,
Good point, Peter. I kind of think of, and for me personally, respect is given, but you can lose someone's respect. To me, it's you always give respect. You go to work, you respect your boss, you respect your supervisor, you give that respect. Now they can lose that. But to me, it's an automatic, you show that respect and go from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and part of telling people who don't believe about Jesus is just showing love, shining God's light in our lives, and respecting our bosses is part of that. Respecting anyone is part of that. With the ultimate goal still, though, of care for their soul. Other things on respect.
Maybe respect is giving something a certain status.
Okay, yeah.
Whatever its context is, like your boss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot there in the imagery of respect, the holding of someone else up, or the placing yourself low. Used to be respectful to kneel before the king, just showing your difference in power.
Yeah, well, like your parents would tell you, I can respect you want to stay out there and play, but you gonna get wet. You have a right to stay out there and play, but you're gonna get wet. I can respect your opinion to say, oh, I don't need God, but you got a penalty to pay. You're gonna reap what you sow there by staying out and shining God's love for you. So you got a right to have the opinion that you do, and I can respect your decision to do that, but you're gonna have to pay the consequences, just like the people in this reading that we just had. You keep on being lukewarm, and you're gonna be left out in the cold.
Hey, Vicar, let me give you a little example from maybe a set home for you. Any vicar that we have at this church, I automatically show them respect because of their position. Now, you could lose that respect, although I've never had a vicar do that. But to me, it's because of your position, I automatically show you respect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. To
also-
some degree, yeah.
We're also talking about like respecting other religions, right?
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the fact of, so let's say I meet someone from a different religion. And so I eventually want to get them in my religion, right?
Mhm.
So at the same time, what I'm doing, I'm respecting their religion by trying to learn more about their religion, not that I want to follow that religion, because that's a dangerous game.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I'm sharing my religion with them, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
To try to maybe tempt them to lean them back my way. And I think, and that's happened before. I mean, it's happened many times. I mean, people are talked into coming to church, you know, just because they want to know, they're curious about the religion that we have. And because they tell you about their religion, and you say you act interested. You really are trying to soak up what they're telling you. And so, because there are some religions, I wonder why they do what they do, because I just want to know. So it kind of prepares me and it gives me artillery to know how to combat to get them to my side.
All right, we're getting over time, so one final, I guess, summary thought. Try and tie things together. As far as our respect goes for other people and those in authority, and for anyone, I guess I think of Paul telling the people living in Rome to respect their government, even though their government was killing Christians. So there's some degree where respect is something that we give, regardless of whether a person is worthy of it or not, because we're not respecting because the person's worth it. We're respecting because God is worth it. Same thing with like respecting a spouse who doesn't always treat you the best. Don't do it for them, do it for Christ. That's our calling. And I guess when I think of respect, that's core to our idea of respect as a Christian. Really, we're showing respect to God. Let's close with prayer then. And if you want to stick around and talk more, I would be all ears for more conversation, but also want to respect time for those who do have to get going. So let's pray, and feel free to stick around after. Heavenly Father, we're called to do some challenging things here in this world. We're called to respect, and we're called to trust in you. And these things aren't easy. Sometimes we don't always want to leave things in your control, but when things are in your hands, they're in the best hands. And ultimately, we do put our trust in you. Help us to continually show that trust and grow in that trust as we continue to learn more about you. All this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.